So again, good evening, Rotarians and colleagues in peace. I'm Jim Alderman, chair of the District 5450 Peace Committee that sponsors the Forum for Discussion. I'll assume you've all read Brian Farr's impressive bio, but what many may not know is he first learned about the greatness of the Rotary Peace Fellow program from his daughter after receiving her Peace Fellowship. He then decided he too should become one. But Brian brings a tremendous breadth of experience to the peace world, which includes his national involvement in the faith community, his career in the legal profession at the state level, and chairing the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and so much more. So please help me welcome our outstanding presenter, Brian Farr. Brian, the screen is now yours.
Thank you. Am I there?
Thank you.
Am I being seen? Am I being heard?
Be saved.
Okay. Okay.
All that believe will be saved.
Okay. Well, let me, I'll try I'm going to see if I can get my PowerPoint to come up. We'll see if we have any better luck with that. Is it there?
We haven't. It is coming up.
What? Can you see it?
Beautiful.
I can't.
Engaging the world, yes.
It's there, huh? Oh, good. It's there. Okay, or at least your world. As he mentioned, I went to that first Rotary International World Peace Symposium. I was not a Rotarian at the time. I went because my daughter had just been selected as a Rotary Peace Fellow. They had asked her to say the invocation at the first ever Rotary Peace Symposium. Local Rotarians said, "Dad, you need to be there," and dragged me down there so that I could hear her say the prayer. They wouldn't let me in unless I registered, so it cost me $475 to hear a 2-minute prayer, but well worth it. Anyway, so I stayed to the symposium and enjoyed. There were a lot of, I think most of the Rotary Peace Fellows that had completed or were currently in their programs were there. And as mentioned in the introduction, past Rotary President Chuck Keller was the keynote speaker. And he spoke with the aura of a British barrister. He spoke in grand terms, and he easily brought people to their feet. But he made those 3 points that had been mentioned in the announcement about this topic today. And they were 3 things that I was working on. So they resonated with me. I spoke with him after. He said, "Well, you ought to be a Rotary Peace Fellow too." I said, "I don't think I can take a leave of absence." But somehow things came together. And I ended up being in Bangkok in the certificate program while my daughter was at Bradford working on her master's in peace studies. And I think we're still the only father-daughter peace team in Rotary. I wanted to talk just briefly about each one of those 3 things, and starting with the understanding. Did somebody say something? I wanted to start with understanding the roots of violence better. That's really why I went to Bangkok, because it was that was one of the things that they said that was a topic that they really spent time on. And it was interesting when I got there. One of the great blessings in the Bangkok program was they had different professors virtually every week. They'd be there for 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes a little longer, from all over the world. And so it was a great chance for me to start asking them about what they saw as the roots of violence. And they would always look at me like I was kind of not quite getting it. And they would say, every conflict is unique. The causes are unique. And one of the approaches in peace building is to do conflict mapping, to kind of look at who the players are, what their positions are, and do this conflict mapping. But my interest was more on what causes violence in a conflict, because everybody has conflict in their life. And when we solve the conflicts in positive ways, usually build stronger relationships. If you think about friends and family, when you solve a conflict together, you usually feel closer. And so my interest was more in what causes violence to enter the conflict. And I was one day helping a young mother who was at a chemotherapy appointment, and this was her third time wrestling with cancer. She had a 3-year-old son that was being just absolutely impossible, and I was taking care of him while she was up at her chemo appointment. And so he was sitting in the back seat of a car as we were driving someplace in his child seat, restraint seat. And I was talking to her and I said, "So Jack, do you think it's easy to be a mom or hard to be a mom?" And he said, "Hard, so hard." And I said, "And that's why we should be cooperative. That's why we should help them. That's why we should try to support them." And he said, "But I want to do what I want to do." And I thought, there in a nutshell is the roots of violence. Everybody wanting to do what they want to do, regardless of the impact on other people. In this case, regardless of the trouble it was causing his mother. So I started looking at what seemed to be things that contributed to violence entering a conflict. And the first thing was just that violence is generally a choice. I mean, somebody initiates it, and whoever initiates it makes that choice. And the roots of violence tend to be the motivations that lead people to make the choice, the rationalizations that they make so that they can live with themselves and feel like they're a good human being, even though they're inflicting violence on somebody, and culturalization, education. And just a couple of comments about each one of those. Now, on the motivations, they typically center on selfishness and greed, the thing that I want what I want, and I'm going to have it. Sometimes the motivation is self-preservation or fear, and sometimes people play on that to generate conflict. Peer pressure or weak courage, when there's pressure to join a conflict, to contribute to the conflict, and you feel like you just feel pushed into it. I looked at a lot of different things in relation to this, but just an example of that one is that there was a guy that was selling drugs on a corner in New York, and somebody stopped to talk to him and tried to explain to him how many lives he was contributing to ruining by doing that. And his comment was, "Well, if I'm not here, somebody else will be here, so there's no responsibility to me." The rationalizations are the minimization or the vilification of the other. And one of the things that just, if you look at the violence in Rwanda, these people were neighbors with each other. And as one group started inflicting violence on the other, the aggressors were referring to their victims as cockroaches. I mean, that wounds me deeply to have a human talking about another human as being a cockroach, somebody to be stepped on and squashed. But rationalizations are the things that we do to justify that it's okay to inflict violence. The culturalization has to do with the cultural narratives that come up. My daughter, when she was at a different time, she was at a semester abroad program in Jerusalem. And as she was walking through the street, she saw some beautiful young children singing a beautiful song. And so in Hebrew. And so she stopped to talk to them, and they spoke English. And so she started asking them about the song. And the song had words about how horrible Palestinians were. And it really shocked her that this pretty sounding song was talking in negative terms about another culture. And so part of the violence comes from the way that we're raised. I think it was Nelson Mandela that said that nobody is born hating, that we learn that from the culturalization that we go through. So in mass violence, there's 3 other factors that come in. You got to have a mass, you got to have leaders that lead the mass and stir them to violence. Religion often shows up as that mass, as you just look over history. So turning to the next one is the Find a Better Path to Peace, and some elements that contribute to that path. A book that impacted me seriously is Peace First by Yuri Sever. He was a lead negotiator for Israel in the Oslo Accords. And this book, to me, if you read the primer, you read about it, but it's his lament after 35 years of trying to negotiate and implement peace treaties. And and his conclusion was that we're just doing this all wrong, that you have to start with addressing the society's beliefs and ideals at their roots, that peace can't be the domino effect of other things, but peace has to come first. And he says that you got to start by laying a foundation of common values, listening to each other, getting to know what's important to each other, just in common values. This is this when my daughter was in her master's program in Bradford. This was kind of the lead text. Oliver Ramsbotham, who you see as the lead author, was her favorite professor there, I think. He was often quoted in the BBC, and I think he had ties with Oxford as well as Bradford. But one of the things that was interesting to me, it's a very good text, a very thorough text. But the last paragraph of the text is one thing that stood out to me. And he in the paragraph, they're talking about identity and how important identity is to a person, and all the different kinds of things that make up our identity. Like we have some kind of gender orientation or gender identity. We have ethnic group, race, religion, just a wide array of things that we identify that make up who we think we are. And his suggestion is that, and he's pretty optimistic about it. He thinks it's moving in the direction, and especially among young people, that the prime identity is humanity, and that every other identity is subordinate to that. But his conclusion is that that's where we need to get. We need to get to the point where everyone's prime identity is that they're part of the human race, they're part of the human family. Um, I think if you read the primer, you saw that one of the principles that sticks out to me is resonance, and how different people resonate with different kinds of things. And I would think there's a whole lot of people who have some kind of faith belief in their life who would not be very inclined to subordinate their faith to humanity, but who also would feel like their faith made them come to the point that Professor Ramsbotham would want to be at, only with more power, because they're looking at every person as a child of God, and that they have responsibility to God to treat those people well and to help them. And so identity is critically important, and humanity has to be a central part of that identity. But people can arrive at that point by different routes without necessarily subordinating other parts of their faith, in my opinion, or of their identity, in my opinion. This is a book written by Brian Grimm, you can see, he spent a good part of his life as a researcher for Pew Global Research. And one of the things that he started to note was that one of the big markers for violence entering a society is denying religious freedom, and people not being able to practice their faith the way they want to practice it, or openly. He has since started an organization he calls the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation. He's got a number of big businesses on board where he sets up employee resource groups where they invite people to bring your whole self to work. Bring your faith, bring everything, and let's get to know each other and appreciate where each other's coming from. And he's doing some great work. But the element that he seems to stress is the importance of respect, particularly respect for one's beliefs. And another element that comes into it is from former Secretary Madeleine Albright. This book was an interesting thing to me. One of her basic themes in the book is that for years in diplomacy school, they were teaching that avoid religion because it can become a flashpoint. And where she had gotten to by the time she wrote this book was that I think this is what I got out of it, and I think it's accurate, is that any diplomat who's worth their salt should really be conversant with the faiths that are prevalent in the area where they serve, so they can understand the people and where they're coming from. And one of her signature lines is that the challenge is to harness the unifying potential of faith while containing its capacity to divide. I, I don't know how you can really seriously think you can build peace without taking a look at the faith element and how you use it to harness the unifying aspect. So the challenge with these elements that I've just mentioned about focus of the new path of focusing on core values and of humanity being at the center of that, of respect for others and for those elements. How do you get there? How do you get to that point? Um, from my perspective, it seems like three of the most critical questions in our time are these: who fills the box with what and how? My sense is that the answers to these questions hold the destiny of individuals and nations. And I suppose if you're thinking at all, your first question is, what box are you talking about? And I think a simple analogy is helpful to explain what I'm trying to say here. Uh, for years, in ethical standards for lawyers, there were two levels. And the lower level was the disciplinary rules. And these are the rules that if you violate them, you're going to be fined and maybe disbarred. And so they're just rules of conduct, like not lying and other things. And then the second level is the ethical considerations. And those are the higher standards that they hope all attorneys work toward. These are standards of decorum and of respect for opposing counsel and of conducting yourself in a higher minded sort of peaceable sort of way, even when you're in controversy. Uh, if there were no ethical standards, the society and the practice of law are impoverished. And I don't know how close you've been to the legal profession, but even with those standards, I've seen people be just brutal to one another. And so, but without the ethical considerations, I think society is impoverished. Those same two boxes exist in civil society. The lower box, the equivalent of the disciplinary rules of the civil and criminal law, that if you violate, you can suffer penalties. And the upper box is the ethical consideration. And that's the box I'm talking about when I say who fills the box with what and how. And as societies become more pluralistic, the challenge of how you fill that box, it gets bigger and bigger, more and more challenging. We hadn't in the U.S. We've had enough of challenges over the first couple hundred years, and at that point it was mostly just the Judeo-Christian ethic that filled that box. And now, as it's getting more diverse, there's more of a challenge. And so who, what, and how fills the box. In our noisy world, there's a competition to fill the box. It can be keen, even severe. And if you just think about it for a minute, in today's news, you see parties battling to try to have the high ground and to be able to get people swayed to go their way. I looked at a lot of different ways that filling that box gets impacted, but there's no shortage of historical examples of people that try to fill the box forcefully or by violence by imposing their will. When I was chair of the Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy, we entertained State Department visitors, U.S. State Department visitors from all over the world. And I've had a number of people from a lot of different countries here. And we one time had a group from Kosovo, 9 people. And I was trying to they were all Muslims, and I was just trying to make sure we were accommodating their interests. And so I was asking about them. And I was asking, would you like us to have a time for prayer? Oh, we don't worry about that. Oh, we don't worry about that. Oh, we don't worry about that. And then one of them finally said, you have to remember why we're Muslim. And I said, the Ottoman Turks? And they said, yeah, they came to town, said convert or die, and we said, I believe. And so that's competition to fill the box, forcing societal norm on somebody else. Not every competition involves physical violence. It can be just shaming somebody and trying to use intimidation tactics to force people to believe the way you believe or to not speak against the way you believe. And we could go on, and you've probably seen them all. I think some of the noise that fills the box in our world, since we get so interested in clicks and who gets the attention. I was at the university, or Utah Valley University, at a luncheon where the religion reporter from one of the U.S. major newspapers was speaking, and she started her presentation. This was a luncheon for student leaders, and she started her presentation by saying that if a story doesn't stir up controversy, she's talking about stories about religion, and she says if it doesn't stir up controversy, it's not news. And then a half hour later, she ended her presentation by noting that young people were less and less inclined to align with a religion, and they were more inclined to describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. And during the question and answer period that followed, somebody pointed out to her where she started, that a story is not a story unless it stirs up controversy between religions, and where she ended, that young people don't want to be part of that, and asked her if she thought there was any connection between the two, and she just said touche. She said she thought there likely was. So there's a lot of different dimensions to that one, and the distractions are so many, and I think that whenever you go on the internet, there's so many things buying for your attention and trying to get you to do a click. And so, in that noisy world, you're trying to figure out who fills the box with what and how. And on the who, sociologists believe that we're born hardwired for empathy, also for survival. But then anyone that we allow to fill our box, and as a child, it's usually parents, teachers that are filling our box. But anybody that speaks out that you allow to fill your box is who's filling your box. I mean, when you think of the box, every individual has their own ethics box, and then communities have some kind of collective ethics box that's somehow made up of the collection of all of the individual ethic boxes in the community, but certain values kind of stand out. And so filling that box better is the better path to peace. That's the thing that Uri Severe was talking about with Peace First, that you got to look at those values. You got to, as Professor Ramsbotham, there's got to be a respect for humanity and it being a prime part of our identity. Respect for freedom of belief and those other things we were looking at. So I think filling the box better is the better path. And so I think it gives cause to step back and just think about, so who should fill it, and with what should they fill it, and how. And on who, I think every individual at some point starts developing the responsibility for what we allow to be kept in our own book. So however we were culturalized, however we were taught, we need to step up and be responsible for what's in our box, and to weigh it up and see if there are things in there that shouldn't be in our box. And then I think we also have an individual responsibility to contribute the best of what we can find to the community's box, and to rising others in filling their box. When you think, what should it be filled with? Peace has been defined simply as the existence of peaceful cultural beliefs and norms. That's certainly what needs to be in the box, is peaceful cultural beliefs and norms that address the root causes of violence, as President Keller noted. And so core to all of that are the common values that Severe was talking about. And as far as the how, a great religious leaders that I respect suggested that what we do is try to teach correct principles and let the people govern themselves. We also teach, we fill the box not by force but by example. I think Rotary and Rotarians shine on that front, on both of those fronts. I think the four-way test is a great a listing of teaching correct principles. And we do it any and every other peaceable way we can think of. So engaging the grassroots, how do we engage the grassroots in building that path to peace and filling that box? I don't know what slide is next because I've been worn out today. But is this a point that anybody would like to talk about what kinds of things, how we can engage the grassroots in building peace? Or would you like me to talk a little more and then you can respond to my thoughts?
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay, I'll keep going. If you read the primer, it says simplify, unify, and engage. And when you think about all of the stuff there is out there on the internet, and you're trying to get people to focus on something simple that they can hold on to. And I'll tell you about a great resource that I saw in just a minute. But I think these are three themes that you do. Some tools that I think can be helpful are that the primer, I hope, is helpful in helping to fill that box and to create that new path of peace. We also have a website that's kind of the next step from the primer, and it was maliciously hacked and taken down a few months ago. We think we're pretty close to having it restored, and hopefully it will be more secure. But there are some things in relation to that, and a third tool that I think is this book. Mike Leavitt used to be the governor of Utah. I was his representative from the Attorney General's office for a while. Rich McKeon was his chief of staff. He was later head of the Environmental Protection Agency for the US, and then the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And Mike is one of the brightest, most articulate, smart thinking people that I've been around in life. And he and Rich wrote this book about finding allies and building alliances. And if you're gonna try and really engage the grassroots, this book has a lot of great advice in it. So it's a useful tool. And going to the practical side, from tools to actions, one of the screens from the 3 Clicks to Peace is this simple screen. 3 Clicks to Peace. Most of the slides have pictures of children from different parts of the world on it. And the reason is largely because at the Camp David Accords, I think you recall that they were pretty close to failure until the parties had a little chat one night about their grandchildren and thinking about what kind of world they were leaving for their grandchildren. And thinking about the children and the grandchildren was credited for making the Camp David Accords come into existence and be meaningful. And so the slides typically have children on them, but this is one about just some simple things that you can do. The first one, to launch. So begin each day with a personal pledge that today I will more fully live my piece of peace in my home, workplace, school, wherever. Start by respecting freedom of opinion, listening to understand, and being civil and warm-hearted. So it starts by making that commitment to yourself, and then each day doing at least one act, and then keeping your antenna up so you're aware of other opportunities to do the same thing. The reason it's called 3 Clicks has, I forgot this slide was there. So if you start with the slide that was just there and then expand on that kind of thing, and you're trying to think how you engage the grassroots, you can start just by having your family get together and have your family kind of make that same pledge that you saw on that prior page, and then working together to kind of spread peace in the community as a family and talking together about what successes you've had. You can expand further to friends and social groups and engage them in making that same pledge to themselves. Clubs, community organizations. When I was the chair of the Rotary Action Group for Peace, one of the things we were focusing on, we were trying to give Rotary clubs around the world simple tools that they could use to build peace in their community. And so starting with getting the Rotary Club to just make that pledge, each member of the Rotary Club to make that pledge and then work together and then spread it into other organizations and even businesses, as Brian Grimm had, but then to expand exponentially. And the way you do that is everybody that you get to make that pledge, you have them do the same thing with their circle of friends. And hopefully gradually you start burning that piece of peace statement into the hearts and minds of everyone. On 3 clicks, there are three different focuses. So the first one has to do with personal responsibility. So it's encouraging people to just look within themselves and be true to the best that's in them. The second one is to get them to look outside themselves and help bring out the best in others, to make it easier for the others to live their peace better by the way you treat them. And that the way you treat them includes not only just respecting them, but lifting them. And this is the service above self thing. It's looking for those that really need a boost in society and helping them. And the third click has to do with looking to the source of wisdom, love, and enlightenment in the and seeking harmony with that source in the best way you know or can find. We refer to the source of wisdom, love, and enlightenment because, I mean, with my interfaith background, I mean, the majority of the world's population believe in God by some name, nature, or description. Though there are varieties of belief, of course, but there are also groups that don't believe in that. And I have friends that have a sense that there's this power in the universe, that we seek to come into alignment with the universe or with nature, or just as Buddhists, just with enlightenment. And so we want it to be broad. And each one of these three different focuses. So the first one is really personal responsibility. The second one is humanity. It's respecting others, looking at them. The third one is looking to that source of wisdom, love, and light. And then each one of those levels has more levels. So you can go into 3 clicks for peace. You can look at those slides in like 2 minutes. But if you want to know more on each one of those clicks, you can take a deeper dive. And this is one of the deeper dives, is encouraging them to embrace elevating light and to coalesce around shared light. And I think that's a critical part of getting the filling that box, that ethical box, and that new path to peace. I guess I should turn a light on here. But in the primer, you probably have noticed, if you read it, that one over there, please. In the primer, there's the account of the Buddhist, if you read that. But in our local interfaith council, we every year have a sacred music night. That's a wonderful, I mean, it's an absolute love fest with people from all faith backgrounds, and some spiritual thought, music, dance from all of those sources. And in the primer, it mentions the Buddhist example of that. And the Buddhist sensei here is like a brother to me. The head of the Islamic Society is like a brother to me. They have beautiful beliefs. I think a number of them are a better person than I am, better than some people in my faith. And I think there's just something about, as you start to see that there's something good to coalesce around there. So is this a good place to think about thoughts?
Yeah, this is a fantastic place, Brian. I thank you so much. I know for my own self, I probably reread Your Piece of Peace annually, just as a reminder. I've spent so many hours with friends sitting and talking, what can we do to go out and bring peace tomorrow? Looking for the way of peace, I finally realized reading this, that peace is the way. Simplify, look around you. What can we do? Unify. I love the unify with a shared identity as number one under the unification. Maslow has pointed out that we really all have very similar desires and tastes. So how, why do we constantly look for differences? Why can't we spend more time finding similarities and honoring the similarities?
That's what the big box, that's what the ethical box should be filled with.
Comments?
Thoughts, comments, questions,
Um,
ways we can do this better?
Brian, if you were to take your PowerPoint down now, stop share.
Well, let me just give you a couple of more quick things, just two or three more
Okay,
screens.
okay, so I can see
You
hands
can,
and questions.
yeah, so when you're,
Quanta, before we go on, Quanta has a quick question.
okay,
I'm
Quanta,
not so sure it's going to be quick, but you made a
But
comment
you will make
about,
it quick.
thank you very much. Please let me finish because you are making me confused and nervous. So what I like to ask is that you mentioned that Ottoman Turks forced others to accept Christianity. And I am
no, no, no,
Turkish
no, no,
and
no, 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 no. These people were saying they were these people were saying they were Muslims because of the Ottoman Turks.
okay, so because I know that in Turkey, for instance, we have mosques, we have synagogues, and
Oh
people
yeah, and
are free to exercise their
I
religion.
I love
Unlike,
Turkey. I
yeah,
love Turkey, and I'm glad you clarified that. Anything where that
yeah,
I've misspoken, I'm sorry. I think Turkey is a wonderful place, and we have a community of Turkish people here in Salt Lake City, and they're committed to building community. They're wonderful people, and I've spent time in Turkey. I love it there. So I'm sorry if I was not clear. I deeply appreciate you clarifying that. Are
thank
you
you.
finished? Is there more to say?
Well, I also put in the chat, perhaps you can look the history of Christianity in the past couple of thousand years, what has happened in
Yeah.
terms of forcing people to believe. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't mean to point the finger at any one group. There's a cartoon that I've seen that has a bunch of Christians marching to the crusade, and the caption, there's two of these soldiers kind of talking to each other, and the caption says something, we're doing this because we're right and they're wrong. And I'm thinking, good heavens. So there's no shortage of blame to go around. There are times when religion has been abused and used in negative ways, but probably in most religions, if not all. And times, even in my own faith, there's a time when they reacted severely against some people who were passing through the territory, and uh, it's a blight. Uh, so, but as Madeleine Albright said, we want to focus on harnessing the unifying power and not the power to divide.
Yeah. Allison has a question.
My question's simple. I actually downloaded that video in an MP4, so if you want to play it, I'll have a go at it.
Let me finish the motivators thing, and then if people would like, we could. It's a minute and a half video, but it kind of focuses on what we're trying to talk about. Is there any other comments before I just talk about this? The motivators is the focus is if you're trying to get people engaged, what kinds of things motivate them? And on that book that I showed you about allies and alliances, they have 8 points about how you build a movement. And I think they're all relevant to how you build peace. I think it's a useful book. And they've written a sequel. I'm not sure if it's been printed yet, but one of their first point of the 8 points is that people tend to come around to come together to solve a common pain more readily than they do an opportunity. And so that's one thing that motivates them. And when you look at Pew Opinion research, I think they had something like 89% of the population of those interviewed just hate polarization and the way societies are pulled apart by all of that nastiness between groups. And so coming together to address polarization is one kind of thing that can be a motivator in pulling together. In their 8 points, one of the things they said is that you got to have some kind of central, concise mission statement, some kind of thing that you're focused on, the value statement. And so they're really talking about a simple, focused ethics box that everybody can buy into and see these are principles that we would like to follow in society. I think you've probably heard of Paul Chappell, the peace activist, and he's suggesting that people hunger for purpose and meaning, for belonging, for self-worth, and as you start looking at shared light, shared values, I think all of these things come into being there. There's promise for people to find more purpose and meaning in life as they follow the kinds of things that he's suggesting. And he also suggests, and Jim has sent me some stuff, that just having an explanation. People want to have an explanation. They want to understand things. They need some kind of clear vision as to what it is they're headed toward. And so kind of my final comment as far as the PowerPoint goes is it goes with this hat that when I wear it backwards. And the thing to remember is to think big, really big. I mean, if you kind of think about that exponential impact that you can have by engaging some people and having them engage people, I think the action group has seen a certain amount of that. Allison's been really good at that, and others in spreading one thing to another. But if you could get people to make that pledge to live their piece of peace better, and then get them to get their friends to make that pledge, somehow we could spread it a lot more quickly. So I'm done. And if I need to be corrected on anything else, please correct me.
Oh, Tom Carlisi has a question.
I just have a response mostly. Brian, thank you, thank you, thank you. What touched me deeply was comments about how we're hardwired for empathy and safety. And how do we do grassroots? And I just want to share in our Rotary Club, the first event we ever did, peace event, was bringing all the interfaiths of our community together. And we had over 100 people show up. And we really worked hard mixing up the tables with diversity. And what they ended up sharing was exactly the hardwire: love
Yep.
and empathy and safety, and say, we all are to the same thing, just a different little approach. And some even said, some even said, I didn't even know there was a Jain religion. I know that there's a Jain religion today.
Yeah.
The other one I want to share is a tribute to you and Allison. And Allison, by the way, it's 2:00 in the morning. God bless you, hon. You live, you're right here.
And her eyes are open.
Yeah, there you go. And the first thing, all these peace builder clubs that are building around the world, built into the Google form is the first encouragement is to read your piece of peace primer. And that is the systemic grassroots way that you're contributing, Brian. I salute you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are some districts that have actually translated into other languages. And when we wrote it, if you look at the covers, the inside of the front and back covers, they're mostly blank. And the reason is that if a district wanted to have a district peace conference and use the primer as part of their conference, they're welcome to do a version of the primer tailored to their district and to put their own principles in there, and to, on the inside of the front cover, to have a welcoming statement from the district peace committee or the district governor or whoever they have there to represent. And there are a couple of districts that have done that, but I don't think it's as well known as it should be. And if you look at the end of the primer, you'll see that there's a bunch of enrichment materials. I don't think those are easily available right now, so we need to take a look at if, I think they're useful. Anyway, thank you, Tom. And I salute you for your great work on nonviolent communication.
Comments, questions? Bob Loeffler, I know this is touching your heart. Allison?
I just want to reinforce really what Brian says. So often in the RAG, we get people that are looking at the big picture, people despondent because of the conflicts, perhaps even in the way things are going in your country, in our country, etc. And I always tell them that while you're looking at that big picture and feeling helpless and hopeless, you freeze, you become impotent, and you do nothing. Instead of that, you look at yourself, open your front door, and look what's on your doorstep. That is peace, and it's about piece by piece that Brian talks about as well. And that's where for how peace is built. We're not all going to be Nobel Prize winners or deities or whatever, but it's when we're kind to our neighbors, when we're consistent in our treatment of family members and so on. That is peace.
If I could just briefly mention also, you talk about grassroots. There's an organization some of you may be familiar with called Braver Angels.
Yeah.
Where I live in Ohio, very, very in the United States, very prolific right now because we certainly have a lot of red and blue differences, but they are led by co-facilitators of the committee. One is blue and the other one's red, and it's all about coming together with crucial conversations with civility. And I think what you're doing with the Piece of Peace and everything Rotary is trying to do through the Action Group for Peace, I think this fits in with that grassroots as just one example of what you've been talking about, Brian. I wanted to just honor that. Okay.
I have a friend that I consider to be one of the brightest people I've ever met, but he started a thing called Envision Utah, and it's a look at how you build stronger, better communities. And one of the things that he thinks, and I agree, is he thinks there's just groups all over the place that are doing good, and that there are sometimes in humanity where there's something about those groups kind of coming together, that people seem to be prepared in different places to do different things. And so the Braver Angels is a great example of that. You might have seen Tim Shriver's Dignity Index, but he is trying to promote civility and discussion. The governor of Utah, when he was president or head of the chair of the National Governors Association a year or so ago, has started a thing he called Disagree Better, and he's a Republican, but is a Democrat counterpart from Colorado, Jim's place. They got together and talked about how we can disagree strongly but respectfully and much more civilly. So there's a lot of good things happening, and I'm grateful for them all. And I think the more we can kind of pull them together, the stronger the movement becomes. Anyway, is David waiting to say something?
David has a question. Yes.
Brian, brings back many, many memories to be in a room with you again.
Yeah.
My question really, both of us having long careers in law and the whole approach to the creation of rules, generally accepted rules, hopefully based on a common, generally accepted ethical foundation. And clearly, we have, if anything, not advanced in that area. We've gone backwards. And I just look at what's happening in, of course, the United States. I looked what's happening in that wonderful visit we had to the Middle East in March of 2019 and what has happened there. So my question really is, taking your ethical approach, which I would describe as being founded in alignment with the loving energy of the universe, how do we, thinking like a lawyer, how do we, like we do for NFL football and soccer and hockey, how do we create effective enforceable rules that are infused with the values that probably everyone in this room would have no difficulty agreeing with? Thank you.
You might have to redirect me as I'm speaking to make sure I stay on track. I should quickly add that David is also one of the brightest people that I've met, and have had a great association with him for a number of years. When he speaks about 2019, we took a delegation to Israel, and we spent 5 days with Israeli Rotarians and 5 days with Palestinian Rotarians. One of the things that was interesting to me about the encounter was the Israeli Rotarians didn't want to talk about peace because they thought it was too distant. They were happy to talk about cooperation and how can we cooperate better. And the Palestinians didn't want to talk about peace because also it's too distant. And what they wanted to talk about was respect. Just show us a little respect here. And it was an interesting challenge, and it was a moving experience we had together there. Not trying to avoid your question. One of the things in the presentation, I mentioned that one religious leader that said, teaches correct principles and lets the people govern themselves. And to me, that's got to be key, because there's no way that you can have enough policemen to enforce everything. And I also, from my own spiritual upbringing, freedom of belief, agency, being able to choose how you live your life, just seems critical. It seems really important, and it seems like we ought to respect that from each other, to each other. And so to me, a lot of it has to be with that simplify kind of thing, and looking at the most central, the most simple kinds of rules that you can get. And when I'm engaged in my interfaith activities, it's looking at those kinds of things. I mean, Christians, if you look at Christians, and they're when Christ was asked what's the great law, and he said that it was to love God and to love your fellow man. And if you look at the Jewish tradition, they're healing the world, tikkun olam. And I think everybody has some kind of focus about working together to make the world a better place. And somehow it's those most simple things. My Hindu friends in their namaste, which means that they recognize the divinity within you, that whatever that light is, the energy that you speak of, that we try to tie into, they recognize that in each other. So I think we're all striving for something similar, and yet when you start trying to define it, it sometimes deconstructs pretty quickly. A lot of years ago, I don't know if you were tuned into it at all, but there was a Secretary of Education, Bennett was his name, and he wrote a little book of values. It stirred up a huge controversy because they were conservative values, and there were a lot of people that didn't feel comfortable with his values. And so, I mean, it's an area that stirs up a lot of controversy, and somehow you just have to focus on those that are most simple. And they have to do with recognizing the humanity of the other, respecting it, respecting their agency, and seeking to live in harmony with that energy force, that light, in the best way you know or can find, which usually involves kindness and other kinds of things. but it has to be the ethical box that is the thing that inspires people to be better. There's so much noise on the internet that it's hard to stay focused on core values, I think. And I don't know. I probably haven't responded to your question at all. So nail me. Tell me where I have failed.
What I'll do is leave it to others, Brian. As always, these really complex questions are difficult for individuals, they're difficult for families, they're difficult for communities. And of course, it's incredibly difficult when you bring it up to the level of a nation state, you bring it up to the level of multiple states. So the challenge that we have now is we have to jump to the global level to deal with issues that cross all the boundaries, all the borders around the world, and also include nature and future generations, or we don't have a future at all. So what I've done, Brian, is I've really subscribed to the concept, treat others as you want to be treated, to be a very broad definition of others, others including both the wisdom and goodness of the past and nature and future generations. And I've done the same with the four-way test, all concerned and expanding it as a basis for individual decision-making. So it involves consideration of impacts on all of those things. That is the past generations or the spirits that remain, the current all humans, and nature and future generations. And I think that's the only way we can jump into protecting and being guardians and being building a unity based on values that are essential for survival. So that's where I've come since we last met in person in Palestine. And I am deeply concerned about the state of the world. So I'm delighted that you attracted an audience of wonderful human beings, many of whom I know, because together I know that we can, with our spheres of influence, make a difference. So thanks, Brian, for bringing us together.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Is now a good time for Allison to show that little video?
If she can, please, yes.
And then you'll be done? It's only a minute and 47
We're gonna go
seconds.
close.
See if it works. I think David gave a great introduction to it.
Yes, David is quite capable of that.
He is.
Discuss out, Allison. Wow, what an ending. Brian, we thank you immensely for that. We are indeed grateful for the work you do, Brian, for better the world and the information you bring to us. We all thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with us. So next month, we will hear about an astounding peace endeavor involving many facilitators, designing, and collaborators, intended to go to a part of the world that needs it the most. Patricia Schaefer has assembled an outstanding team using many familiar tools to make a major difference. Even the name Bridges to New Horizons came about for specific reasons. It'll be an exciting opportunity to hear what can and is being done to change the world. Brian, we are so thankful for what you bring to us. And number one in your section B is a shared identity. Let's look for shared identity. What do we have in common? Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks to each one of you. Been good to be with you. Bye.